Next one is Pierre-Luc Dubois, the guy who's been linked to the Montreal Canadiens for what seems like about 25 years. We've heard some of the asking prices that seem a little ridiculous, but what are your thoughts there?
My favorite potential destination for Pierre-Luc Dubois would be the Minnesota Wild. And that is one of the teams I listed as a potential landing spot for him. I have an article on dailyfaceoff.com right now looking at the potential destinations, and Montreal is one of them as well. But just the idea of Dubois playing with Kirill Kaprizov, to me, if he goes to Minnesota, he gets an unquestioned number one center job. Joel Eriksson, obviously a great player as well, but he has to do a lot defensively. So if Dubois were to go to Minnesota in a trade, I think he's going there specifically to play with Kirill Kaprizov, and I think he would have career best numbers in that scenario. Of course, it's a little complicated for Minnesota. They have more than $14 million in buyout penalties to figure out, so it's not the easiest trade to make. They'd have to move a body out that has a significant cap hit as well, but just from a hockey standpoint, he's a great fit there, and I think from a fantasy standpoint, he could have the best numbers of his career if he goes to Minnesota.
Minnesota was the first one I picked, and obviously there's a lot of people projecting to go to Montreal, but it's like crazy idea. What about Columbus again? Like, well, like they're starting to build something, and they're willing to trade assets. And you know what? They've had a lot of good young defenseman prospects that they're gonna not have space for all of them. So at a certain point, maybe that's what you look at and say, like, okay, like maybe Svozil and a couple of other assets, and we bring in a guy like Dubois if he'd be willing to go back. But like now, that team would be pretty competitive given all the trades they've been making.
It's funny. I thought of that just from a hockey standpoint. It actually makes a ton of sense. And I actually was talking to Jarmo Kekalainen last week about the Provorov trade, and he was saying he's not done and he knows that he needs a center. So it actually would fit. I just don't see Dubois being willing to go back there because his whole thing is forcing his way out of various cities. So I would be pretty blown away if that happened. I also think Colorado would be an interesting fit if they don't want to spend the overpay to keep JT Compher. Go for Dubois instead, and then you have Dubois and McKinnon up the middle.
Yeah, especially with Landeskog out, and you need some extra scoring punch up there. So that was another one I thought. It's just like, how do they make that work?